Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Archive Speaker Meeting. Can we please have a moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers, followed by the Serenity Prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We ask that you please take a moment to silence your cell phones. And we will now pass the basket in honor of the seventh tradition, which states every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Welcome to the Racine Area Archive Speaker Meeting. Our purpose is to document the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, to make the history of the organization accessible to AA members, and to provide a context for understanding AA's progression, principles, and traditions. We meet here at the Grove Club the last Sunday of every month. The first half of the meeting is a question and answer period, followed by a break. And then after the break, the speaker resumes and shares their experience, strength, and hope on a passage from the Big Book. This meeting will be recorded and stored at the Racine Area Central Office. A digital copy will be sent to Area 75 Archives, and it'll be uploaded to YouTube. Is there anyone here with less than 30 days of sobriety? Could you please raise your hand? No? All right. Is there anyone here with more than 15 years of sobriety? Could you please raise your hand? Awesome. Welcome. The speakers selected for this meeting are old-timers. An AA old-timer is any member who has been continuously sober for a significant period of time. The definition of significant is open to interpretation, but for this meeting purpose, an old-timer is considered anyone with 20 years or more of sobriety. The old-timers interviews serve as a representation of the significant impact that long-term sobriety can have on our AA community. And without further ado, I will introduce our speaker for the evening, Kevin S. Please welcome Kevin. All right, Kevin, we have some questions for you.
All right.
What's your sobriety date?
October 8th, 1989.
Wow.
Nick, what's your birth date?
My birth date?
Yeah.
Belly button birthday?
Sure.
June 9th, 1999?
Oh, okay. I was just curious. Come on, let's have some fun with this.
Okay, we can try. Who was the United States President when you joined AA?
Well, in typical fashion, I thought I knew what I was talking about. When I was talking to Kately last night, I got home and I looked it up. It was actually George H.W. Bush, Mike, not Reagan.
Oh, okay. All right. When and where was your first contact with AA?
So the first time I remember hearing about Alcoholics Anonymous is my uncle was a drunk. And I remember driving past here when I was a kid, and my dad said, that's where people go for help, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And then after that, the first contact was actually through treatment. The treatment counselor had said, if you want to stay sober for the long haul, you got to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I came to the Grove Club on a 5:30 Friday night meeting, walked in downstairs, and Kai J was very welcoming, and I think at that point I realized these were the people I was looking for all my life. So
okay.
It was pretty awesome.
All right. Can you describe what AA was like back when you joined compared to today?
You know, I think like anything else in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's in retrospect, and I think there's a lot of people in this community that have different perceptions of it, but I think there was a lot of don't drink and go to meetings. There was I would say the beginning of some serious step work with people. The big book was starting to become more known in this community. So I think it's a lot better, I think, today than it was when I first got sober. I think there's more people having better sobriety these days.
All right. Who was your first sponsor, and how did you end up with them?
So my first sponsor was James W. Wagner, and I do not remember how I connected with him, to be honest with you. I really don't.
Interesting. Okay. What were you like as a newcomer, and how do you think others would have described you when you were a newcomer?
So, I was an idiot. I was 20 years old. I was young. I lived at my mom's house. I was immature. I was irresponsible. I'm still immature and irresponsible, but yeah, I was kind of dumb. I was kind of naive to the world in general. So Alcoholics Anonymous was, I guess you could say, a family that allowed me to, or helped me grow up.
Okay. All right. I can certainly relate to that. Who were the alcoholics prominent in your early sobriety?
Man, there was a lot of them. I listened to Jimmy's speech and spiel from last week or the last month, and there was Kai. There was a lot of younger guys. There was Kai, Chuck Z, Jimmy Fox was around. I got connected with James Wagner, Frank Brandeis, my sponsor Kurt. Man, it's a long time ago. It's hard to remember all the people that were around then. Green Dick was around, Emil Panic, some of the really old guys were around. Yeah, Red Haas, yep. Yeah, I would say that's pretty much the group of folks that were around. Yeah, Willie B was here.
All right. Can you think of any AA catchphrases from back then that you don't hear anymore or as often? And what did they mean to you?
I think there was two that I remember the most was don't drink and go to meetings, and turn it over were two common things that you heard often. What was the second part of that question?
What did they mean to you?
I think the don't drink and go to meetings was kind of a given. It's like if you want to stay sober, not drinking is a good start.
Sure.
Going to meetings I think was important, especially very early sobriety, a lot of meetings. We're fortunate there's quite a few meetings around here.
Sure. Okay. Did you get involved in service early on? And if so, what did you do?
A little bit, a GSR. We went to some area meetings, district meetings. My home group was in charge of the public information cooperation with the professional community. So we would mail letters out to different businesses around this area to let them know that Alcoholics Anonymous was out there with meeting. We'd send them a meeting list and phone number, contact info.
Okay.
Emptying ashtrays.
All right. That I've never gotten to do.
No, most people probably won't get to do that again.
What kind of events or sober social activities were there when you got sober? And tell us what those were like.
Man, where's Jimmy? Jimmy, was there a lot of dances back then or what? Lots of dances. Lots of dances. My home group tended to go out to eat a lot. You know, we'd go out to eat after the meetings. Just all kinds of different social events. A lot of times it was the dances. We'd hang out downstairs and talk. But yeah, just kind of saturated with different social events.
Okay. Are you a good dancer?
No.
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 Same here.
It's a good question.
Same here. What was your first home group, and why did you decide to make that your home?
I think it ended up being St. John's Nepomuk over on the north side was my first home group. That's where we kind of, the Work the Steps group was at. Yeah, it was St. John's Nepomuk.
Okay.
Yep.
Do they still have meetings there?
That I don't know.
Okay. What do you remember the most about the first time you sponsored someone?
That they didn't stick around. It's pretty scary because I think you have that person's life in the palm of your hands. And it's really ultimately up to that individual in hindsight again, but Yeah, it was pretty scary, but I think that's one of the benefits of sponsorship is you always have a sponsor you can go to say, hey, I'm running into this issue with so-and-so, can you help me out?
Okay. How about the first time you were sponsored? What do you remember that sticks in your head about that?
You know, I gotta say, I wouldn't say I was an easy person to sponsor, probably because I needed a lot of guidance. Like show up at work on time and then you won't get written up for being tardy, kind of simple things like that. But I was pretty desperate, so I was willing to follow directions. And looking back at it, I guess that's the thing that got me sober and got the obsession to leave, is I was willing to take some direction because I was pretty terrified at a young age. I was very, very terrified of dying.
Got it. Okay. What is prayer to you, and what are your prayer habits like?
My favorite prayer in the whole wide world is, please God, or what the fuck.
Do you meditate, and if so, how?
I think originally I started to do really formal meditation, but I think if you're always open and always willing to be teachable, some of the meditations are things you hear other people tell you. Because I look at meditation as listening to God, and I think we hear that from lots of people if we're open to that.
Yeah.
And then I think also some of the things we experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is, in hindsight, that's the meditation. I guess you hear or see what happened post haste after it happened, and I think it's part of the practice of formal meditation prepares you for that. So I don't do anything crazy. No cows or sheep or lambs or anything like that.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's all the questions we have. Yeah, looks like it. So thank you for answering those questions.
Hey, no problem.
All right. We are going to go on a 10-minute break, and then Kevin is going to come back and share his experience, strength, and hope from a passage from the Big Book. Thank you, Kevin.
Awesome.
Welcome, Kevin, back.
So just like everybody else, I have a bunch of notes I'll never read. Where's Yola? There she is. Yola, I was going to read an excerpt to Wives, but I didn't want you to leave with a resentment. So, for some reason, I'm not sure why, I'm sure God will reveal that to me eventually, but for some reason, page 84, this is in we're talking about step 10, it says, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and in effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And this is really the thing that sticks out to me. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor afraid. That is our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So when I got sober and got a sponsor and started working the steps, I'm not really sure. I think we think a lot of things happen in Alcoholics Anonymous, or at least as myself as an alcoholic. If I do this and do this, I'll get this and I'll get that. And I think, at least in my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, is like if you were to look at the 12 promises, I don't think I've ever experienced all of those things at exactly one time, exactly as they're written there in the promises. But I've seen bits and pieces and got glimpses of it, and some of those things have continued, and some go away and come back. And the only thing, I wouldn't say the only thing, one of the things I remember about this position of neutrality is, I don't remember where I was in the steps when this happened, but I remember walking out the door of my mother's house, because I was a really successful alcoholic. Let me qualify myself. When I got here, I was 20 years old. I drank for about 3 years. I drank, at the end of my drinking, I was drinking about 1 liter of Smirnoff Blue Label. Does anybody know what Smirnoff Blue Label is? Mike would. It's 100 proof. You always go get the biggest, heaviest shit, right? But it wasn't really a joke, because I wouldn't eat for 4 or 5 days, and if I ate, it came out the other side within hours. And a bunch of my friends were getting into cocaine at the time, and I thought, holy shit, I know the way I am with anything. If I get 1, I want 100. If I get a little, I want a lot. And I was terrified of the cocaine thing, because I saw what it was doing to people, and I thought I would end up down that. In fact, I knew I would end up down that road if I started pursuing that. So, when I went to my boss and said I have a drinking problem, he asked me if I tried Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told him, no, that won't work. Because, we know everything, right? And I had been so successful at my life. I was living with my mother. I had this menial little job. My girlfriend had left, and basically what little bit of life I had was falling apart. And ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous because this counselor had said, if you want to stay sober, go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous and got the sponsor and started working the steps. And like I said before, I think most of us experience this stuff in hindsight. We see it after it happens. My sponsor, in his infinite wisdom at the time, James, knew it was important for me to get going on the 12 steps. We started moving through the 12 steps. James was going, I think he was going to Parkside at the time, and he either was working second shift or something with my schedule and his schedule didn't quite match up. So I thought, well, I'll just take a break now. I was doing a 4th step. It's a good time to take a little vacation from Alcoholics Anonymous. So I didn't have much contact with James, and I kept going to meetings. And I kid you not, I was at that intersection over there on Washington Avenue and West Boulevard here, and the urge to drink was so unbearable. I just couldn't believe it. I was going to meetings, and they said go to meetings and don't drink, and I had just left the Grove Club, and the obsession to drink was so great, it was unbelievable, and the only thing I could think of was to say, please, God. And by the time I got home, about 4 blocks away, that obsession had left, and I knew there was something. I knew I had to get busy. So I picked up another sponsor, and we started taking the actions of the steps. And as we started taking the actions of the steps, again, in his infinite wisdom, my sponsor knew the most important thing was, because remember, when I got here, I was an idiot. Now, Mike and Mark, you can say yes if you want, but I was pretty stupid when I got here. What's that? No comment? No comment. I kept working these 12 steps, and I remember walking out the door of my mother's house and going, for the first time in my life, I feel comfortable being me. And I think that's about when the obsession to drink had left, was somewhere around that time. And it wasn't very long after I had experienced the obsession. That was in August of 1990. You can ask me what time my kids were born. I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you it was August of 1990 was the last time I had the obsession to drink alcohol. And to me, that's an absolute fucking miracle, because when I got here, that's all I could think about. Work was getting in the way, the girlfriend was getting in the way, everything was getting in the way of the obsession to drink. So one of the things that I learned from that experience is that, first of all, I had to reach out to something outside of myself. Now, one of the things I find funny in Alcoholics Anonymous is, and I've done this myself, is, hey, you know, if you work these 12 steps, you'll get plugged into this power outside of yourself, and your life will change. And they're like, oh, I don't want any of that. Yet I spent my whole life looking for things on the outside to fix me. And I get to Alcoholics Anonymous and I fight this outside thing to fix me. And I think once I stopped fighting that and just started taking the actions, that's when that power outside myself stepped in and did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I believe that's probably what they're talking about, where they say, for this time sanity will have returned, regarding alcohol, because trust me, I've done all kinds of crazy shit sober. I've done things to wreck relationships and made bad decisions and pissed people off, suffered the consequences of those things. So I continue to work the steps with my sponsor, and then it dawned on me, that's what they're talking about, that spiritual experience. Something inside of me has changed. I don't think and feel the way I used to think and feel. I'm comfortable being myself. And that's when I started to see that connection to that spiritual experience. And it was not, because I read this book and I was like, I got to have this great white light thing, this big flash in the pan thing. And here it was happening as a result of these things. And it was a result of those actions. I think one of the other things I learned as I worked the steps was, and I think it's probably one of the most important things that I've experienced as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous, is the ability to say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answers. And I think, you know, Nick was asking me about meditation. I think sometimes we see those answers from other people, from situations. We see those things as a result of taking these formal actions. We see them kind of in hindsight, or as they're unfolding, or God steps in and steers you in a certain direction. And I think that's what they're talking about, is keeping in fit spiritual condition. Is my problem isn't alcohol. If alcohol was my problem, and most of this shit's stolen, trust me. When I first got sober, I was driving a truck and I was listening to a lot of tapes. I was listening to Clancy, Frank Milos, Keith Drum, Joe McHugh, all these guys. They had these little tidbits of information that later on I started to see what they were talking about was, if my problem was alcohol, I would have stopped drinking and my problems would have went away. I had tried repeatedly in that short period of time to stop drinking, and I couldn't stop drinking. There's something wrong with me. I have alcoholism. It's the way I think and the way I feel, the way I perceive the world. Chuck C. talks about it in great depth in his book, A New Pair of Glasses. And I think Chuck and Clancy and some of those older guys kind of unlocked some things that maybe Bill did or didn't know. I don't know. But alcoholism is a disease of perceptions. The way I see things now and the way I thought they happened were not always based in reality. And I think that's what they're talking about with this sanity is, here my mind's telling me to drink something that's killing me, and everybody around me sees that it's not good for me. So there must be something wrong with the way I think and the way I feel, because I used alcohol to mask all those things. It made me 10 feet tall and bulletproof. It made me feel comfortable in my own skin. It allowed me to talk to girls. It allowed me to go to work. It allowed me to do a lot of things. And I think when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought the whole goal of Alcoholics Anonymous was just to not drink. And I think one of the things I've experienced in the last couple of years is that the fight isn't with things on the outside. The fight are the things on the inside. I constantly fight with wanting to be right. I constantly fight with wanting to know the answers. I constantly fight with going with the flow. I'm afraid to just live life the way life is laid out for me. I want to manipulate things and make things move because I think they'll be a certain way, and it doesn't happen that way. Usually it ends up worse than I would expect it to have been. When I just go with the flow in life and just go where God expects me to go, things turn out okay. And again, a lot of those things you see in hindsight. And I think that's fit spiritual condition is once we work through these 12 steps, it's almost like a dry run. The sponsor takes you through the 12 steps so that the wreckage of the past is cleared away. That's so that you can start out, I guess you could say, on a new foot or a new beginning. And then it's up to us as individuals, at least. My sponsor said the toughest person you'll ever sponsor is yourself. Because if you think about it, how much time do we spend in Alcoholics Anonymous? I mean, we're not here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The majority of my life is lived outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where I need to practice the principles of these 12 steps. That I'm not God, and that I need to harmoniously cooperate with God, my fellows, and myself to be able to live life and have a somewhat comfortable, I guess you could say comfortable life. I have experienced plenty of pain and suffering in sobriety, but there's been people around me that have supported me, given me direction, given me different perceptions on how to handle those situations, what kind of actions to take. Because everything for me needs to be an action. You know, it's funny, how many people here have seen the movie A Christmas Story? Where he goes against Bad Bart, and they're like, he's got this big fantasy about the Red Ryder BB gun and shit. That's what my life was like before, and there's times now where it's like, that's what my life is going to be like, and it never fucking turns out like that. But when you look back at it in hindsight, it worked out the way it was supposed to work out, and it's a pretty good deal. I'll close with this real quick. We had this traditions workshop a while back, and I had to call Daryl up because I was so busy being obsessed with something around the house that I forgot to go to the steering committee meeting or whatever the hell it was called. And I called Daryl up, and I ended up talking on the phone with him for like 35 minutes, and I hadn't talked to him in quite some time. And and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't his big thing is, this is a pretty cool deal? This is a pretty cool deal. So, if you're newer, I would offer this bit of advice because for some reason in this period of my sobriety, I'm into giving advice. But I guess I should heed my mother's words of, just because I have advice doesn't mean anybody wants to take it, is that it's all about action. It doesn't really matter what I think or what I feel. It matters what I do. My boss doesn't really care what I think or what I feel. My life was filled with good intentions before I got here. I was never able to pull that shit off on my own. It had to come from, like it says in the book, I had to find a power greater than myself that would solve my problem. And I'm my own biggest problem, and I will always be my biggest problem. So it's always got to be some type of action. And the best action for me to follow on a daily basis to stay in fit spiritual condition is to practice those 12 principles that we're given. And like I said, it's kind of like a dry run, but then it's time for me to grow up and start following through with that. Because like Daryl said, it's a pretty cool deal. I appreciate it. I was terrified as hell to be up here, but, you know, it is what it is. So thanks for coming out. I appreciate it.